Well, greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second MCC webinar, From Hearts to Hands, another behind-the-scenes look at MCC's work. Thank you for your ongoing support for MCC, the interest in the work that we do, and we're very happy that you're part of the story and thrilled that we can offer you this unique way of giving you some view and glimpse into the way MCC serves in the name of Christ. My name is Rick Kober-Bauman, and it really is a privilege to serve as the Executive Director of MCC Canada, and I get to be your host again today. I hope you voted in the poll, and I'm going to just give you a few more instructions now about how things are going to unfold. You will be kept muted throughout the webinar, so you don't actually have to worry if there's a little bit of background noise in your world. Please do submit questions. We're looking forward to having a good chunk of our time near the end for Q&A, and you can submit those through the Q&A, which is in the taskbar at the bottom. If you move your cursor around the bottom of your screen, you should see the taskbar bring up a Q&A function. There you submit your questions. We'll try to answer just as many as we can during the webinar. We might be able to answer some of them later, and if we need to send you an email, we'll try to do that as well. We are recording the session, and if you miss something or want to have a listen again later, you'll be able to do that as well. So let me say a little bit about today's topic, material resources, the things that MCC sends. And we do this through dozens of containers. Last year, just one short of 50 containers went out with material items. Some of you will be very familiar with these if you're volunteers. Others might be more surprised to hear that we send comforters, which are handmade knotted blankets, hygiene kits, relief kits, school kits, canned meat to places like Syria, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ukraine, and many other countries where MCC works around the world. Now, these gifts not only help families with needed essentials, they truly do communicate a message of hope and care, letting vulnerable people around the world know that they are not forgotten. I have powerful memories of being in a basement of a church in Syria during a time of considerable conflict still 2 years ago, and seeing stacks of handmade blankets just being opened out of the bales coming from Europe and some from Canada, gifts that were clearly made with loving hands, shared in love, and then opened and held with equally loving hands, in that case in Syria. We sent items across the world last year from warehouses in Canada and the US. I have lots of numbers in front of me. That might come up in the question and answer period later on. Today, we want you to hear, though, from 3 presenters who can tell you about the impacts of your gifts. They're going to take about 7 to 10 minutes to give you a snapshot of the work that they're doing in their areas, and then we'll try to take the latter part of our hour for you to have questions. So, short introductions of all 3 of my colleagues here. First, Sofia Bezoplenko. She coordinates material resources in Manitoba, Winnipeg, Manitoba, where I understand it's in the high 20s today, Sofia. She coordinates volunteers to create meaningful serving opportunities that help meet the needs of international partners and projects, and then manages as well the packing and shipping of those resources. She's been with MCC 5 years, is married to Nathan, and is happily living also with 1 cat named Annie. And then in Jordan, Alex Azar. He's our program officer in Jordan, has a background in business management, born and raised in Jordan, then became, as he says, a proud Canuck from 91 to 2009, living in Toronto, Ontario, before moving back to Jordan. He's married to Suha, and they have 2 children, Hani and Annabella. And then our 3rd presenter, Andriy Chalps. He's been working with MCC Ukraine for 3 years now as the program manager, previously worked in another humanitarian assistance partner of MCC, and he's married as well, 3 kids. I know a little bit about his personal story, but I'm going to leave that to him. He has a very powerful personal story of coming to Mennonite Central Committee. So those are our guests. That's the end of my introduction. I want to give them and you maximum time. So we go to you, Sofia. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. I will just share my screen here and we can get going. Perfect. So I am really glad to be here with all of you and to have this opportunity to tell you about the material resources part of MCC's disaster relief work. I am doing this webinar from home, and this is just part of our new COVID reality. My vantage point from on MR is at the beginning or near the beginning of the MR journey with the small things. The first idea, the first phone call, the first toothbrush purchase, the first kit bag. When we are faced with the enormity of need in the world, it can seem like a bar of soap is just a drop in the bucket and something that has a very finite impact. But what I've seen and learned in my role is that the small things are rarely as small as we think. They grow and expand and they make ripples and they are meaningful. So I just want to illustrate to you how with 3 vignettes, 3 examples. First one, 20 years ago, MCC approached Hutterite colonies in Manitoba. Just a moment here. I will try to advance my slides. Here we go. 20 years ago, MCC approached some Hutterite colonies in Manitoba and wondered if some of the women at these Hutterite colonies would be able to sew comforters to help meet some of our international program needs. My friend Mary, we will call her, was at this meeting and was inspired by the idea of doing something in response to the great need around the world. She was so excited that she sewed 17 blankets in 3 days. Others became interested in helping, and so they began to meet weekly. 20 years later, there are more than 50 Hutterite colonies participating in Manitoba alone, making comforters for MCC's disaster relief work. Pictured here is Milltown Colony, one of a number of colonies that host a blanket making week, inviting folks from other colonies to participate from age 7 to 70. There is a task for everyone with plenty of beautiful hymn singing accompanying it. And this last November, Milltown Colony completed almost 700 comforters during their blanket making week. And my friend Mary remains a longtime friend of MCC and is still diligently sewing weekly. Two years ago, I got a call from a man named Ernie, who was working with an adult EAL school in the city, which is English as an additional language. They were interested in partnering with MCC to have their students learn basic sewing skills with the aim of eventually gaining employment in the garment industry. Ernie told me that they were the students were finding that they were experiencing challenges in a traditional classroom setting because of traumas from war and conflict in their home countries. And the staff thought that hands-on learning could be an alternative education model while also providing space to practice their English. So I met with a few staff and to teach them about comforter making and provided supplies to get them started. This weekly optional activity brought a handful of women from all different countries around a comforter and around shared experiences. And this initiative grew into something that we weren't necessarily anticipating. These women, as they met, they began to talk about their home countries, the challenges they faced, their worries for their families still back home, what their needs were, and what they could do. They met weekly to tie knots and to process, and they began to heal. Tying comforters gave them the gift of community to share their stories in a culturally familiar setting, as well as an opportunity to channel their worries productively into beautiful comforters that would provide relief to vulnerable people from some of their own home countries. They were empowered to give back and provide tangible help to others in need. Arnie and the other staff told me about the difference they saw in the women being like night and day. They were coming out of their shells and engaging with the teachers and other students and smiling. And in the end, we had dozens of comforters, but so much more. Arnie and I also worked with another EAL classroom that used an opportunity to pack 500 hygiene kits as a chance to creatively and practically teach small business management. That is what you're looking at in this picture, in these two pictures. The staff created a whole curriculum around the kit packing activity. They incorporated things like work management, employee supervision, and maximizing efficiency. And so as they packed these kits together, it was practical job training, as well as an opportunity for the students to meaningfully help 500 people in need. Third story, my friend Rebecca Friesen contacted me during the holiday season, wondering if there was an opportunity to pack kits for MCC. This was a few years ago. She wanted her kids to not just think about receiving presents, but also to think about others in need during this time. So their family of 4 came for a tour of the warehouse, learned a bit about MR, and put material resources, and put together a few kits. The following December, Rebecca gathered 3 other families, and they put together 200 relief kits, which is what you are looking at in these 2 pictures. The December after that, Rebecca called back, happy to help again. Their family packed a dozen more relief kits at home. It's amazing to see and think about the impact of over 200 relief kits, but even 1 relief kit and 1 bar of soap. I'm struck by the fact that in the middle of this worldwide pandemic that we are living in, we have become very aware of the impact 1 bar of soap could make on someone's health, their family, and their life. The small things are not as small as we think. A bar of soap isn't just a drop in the ocean of need. The ripples keep moving out in ways that we may not be able to count. The totals you see on the screen are the MR items that were collected across all of the MR centers in Canada and the United States over our past fiscal year, which is April 2019 to March 2020. As COVID-19 continues to affect communities worldwide, particularly those most vulnerable, MCC's material resources will be an important part of our health and sanitation projects. The requests from our partners reflect an adjustment in these priorities. And this year we see a significant increase in hygiene kit requests. As you can see, last year we sent about 55,000, and we have had 91,000 requested for this year across all of our partners. And the total number of containers to be shipped this year is up from last year as well. So the needs continue, and we are doing what we can in this new and different landscape to meet these needs.
Thank you, Sophia. Loved your stories. How to write women and healing stories and family gathering to pack kit stories. Thank you. I know there are questions being generated, and we encourage those to keep coming. Some of them might be for Sophia, others for Alex or André, who are still coming. There is a question that's come in now about whether MCC is unique in sending material resources, and we're not. There are many other agencies that do it. We have a history right from our beginnings 100 years ago of sending material things along with the rest of our relief development and peace work. In fact, someone just reminded me of a funny story that's happened more than once, where when we hand out blankets and say that they're from Mennonite Central Committee, the blankets themselves sometimes get known as Mennonites. And there are stories of people trading in other blankets because they want a Mennonite. So no, we're not the only ones that do it. We have a long history and a lot of strong association, good association of material resources with Mennonite Central Committee, and many of you are part of that story. So we're going to move now to Jordan, to Alex. Alex Azar. Welcome, Alex, and we look forward to your stories.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you everyone for joining us and giving us this opportunity to express to you our gratitude and what the difference you're making. I'm going to try to share my screen. All right. Okay, I'm the program officer for Jordan. Deal with the partners, reporting, monitoring, and this is part of the most important part of my, it's a calling actually, the material resources. So this is how the story goes. This will be one of the stories I'm going to tell today, is the story of material resources and the enormous changes it's doing to Jordan and its refugees and all the vulnerable people. First of all, when I joined MCC, I learned about how important it's the family. So here's my family. I'll let you meet them. Suha, Hani is about 8, Annabella is 6. And this is one thing I learned, how much valuable MCC and they appreciate the family. Those, I'm going to jump to material resources. Those are just, I'm telling you, a sample of the generosity of what's been generated since 2014 till 2020. This is 57 containers. And those are the relief kits and the hygiene kits we've been receiving, school kits. Of course, there's a list below, like teachers, canes. Those are extra things we keep receiving. And my God, they're doing lots of changes. And even this year, we're proud, we started into canned food. We're going to receive the shipment in summer, hopefully. Of course, the story starts with you and your donations and your support to us. Those are my colleagues in Canada at the MR centers. They're collecting, they're doing whatever you donate, they're gathering it into containers before they're being shipped to Jordan. And this is when it arrives. Of course, it's reached the port of Aqaba, then it's moved to our local partner, Caritas Jordan, to their warehouses where it's unloaded. By the way, that Pajero is an MCC car, and we're just documenting and helping them download. Of course, this is my daughter, Annabella. She's cheering the people to finish up and wrap up because there was 2 containers that day. And even my son here he's doing the Canadian curling because they figured it's a way faster way to just push the buckets out quicker. Okay, and this is like another story how all those buckets are restored again before distribution. All this enormous gratitude and enormous efforts to make this happen. This is just the other side of the story. Material resources is a special thing for me because I've been at both sides. I've been to the MRC in US, and I know our counterparts in Canada are doing a great job. And I've been there and I know how it feels to pack a thing and send it. And I've been at the receiving end. And that's what my second message is, the power of the message that you are sending when people from different sides of the world, different religions, many barriers are being crossed. It's a powerful message when you send something with the gift of love with our Lord and you're giving it to people in need. This is so much support. They feel there is hope. Somebody's looking after them. And I've seen this many times and I know the effect. And I've been there at the receiving end, and being at the starting end also was incredible. And today, one of my stories is the story of Ali. This is a Syrian refugee. He was at one of the distributions and you can see him, he's very emotional. And I couldn't resist but to ask him, why he's been receiving like school kits, and it really moved him. And I was really curious and I asked him, what's it about? How can I help you? What can you express? And he was just so happy that he had received 3 school kits for his children. And he was telling me in that amount I would save in buying stationery, I could feed my family for 2 weeks. Imagine that. And this is just part of the story. So it was moving, and he knew receiving this would save him the money he was willing to spend, especially on the school start. This is one of the things we are just making. The story of Aisha, she's Jordanian, she's a Bedouin. She was at one of the distributions of comforters. Something is also a signature of MCC. We're proud to do it. It's always on demand. People just love it, especially we have harsh winters. And Aisha was really joyful when she received, and we called her name, and she was gathering like comforters. And I also asked her, like, could you please, can you talk to me? Can you tell me what you're feeling? She was telling me for a long time, this is a relief for me because I will use those covers or comforters to cover myself and my children rather than to use them as mattresses to shield us from the cold, because they don't have mattresses. They've been using whatever they can put their hands on. So to her, MCC donating those comforters made her at least cover herself and use it for, you know, warming her body. And this is something was like hard to get in the times before. This is also another project we supported, the Christian Iraqis who were displaced from Iraq in mid-2006-07. This is an Iraqi family, and we were supporting them in comforters and heaters. The man, he lost his leg during the Iraqi invasion in 2003, and he had arthritis. So the sight of the heaters and the comforters to him, he started crying, this guy, and I figured just at least, I know, he said, this will give me comfort. Finally, I can stop shaking. Because Jordan, though you think it's desert, but it has cold, harsh winters, you know, so, and it can get really extremely cold. So I can relate like to his pains and feeling, and you should see how much joy such a donation just made in his life. And the final story is of this beautiful Jasmine, like the roses, exactly. It's called, she's called Yasmin in Arabic. The minute she received the comforters, she started really crying, and her mother was like curious. I mean, what's wrong with you? And she was crying. This is the first time I'll get to cover myself on my own and not share it with my sister. And really, it caught the heart of everyone. And it was really small things we take for granted in life. To her, this was like a life-changing event, and you should see the way she was hugging it. And so happy, it's something to claim for her own. So, yeah. Thank you for your time, and please let me know whatever you need, any questions about Jordan. And once again, I thank you for your generous donations. They're really making a difference.
Alex, thank you. Powerful stories of gratitude from the little people like Yasmin, who now get their own blanket. And yeah, thanks for the way you've communicated that so well through stories back to our listeners today. And again, participants, feel free, if you've got questions now for Alex or something that sparked from Sophia's presentation earlier, we welcome those questions. And now we want to hear from Andriy Chaus from Ukraine. Welcome, Andriy.
Greetings to everyone from Ukraine, to people who are watching us in United States and in Canada. And I'm going to share a little bit regarding Ukrainian experience. Yes. And as you know, the story of assistance to Ukraine started 100 years ago, I think so. And the MCC ministry is continuing in Ukraine. We work through 6 partners in Ukraine in different regions, and 3 of them are located in Zaporizhia, which is like the Mennonite center of Ukraine, in Ukraine, because of a lot of Mennonite colonies were there. And most people that receive this help are very vulnerable, and these uprooted and internally displaced people who live in very difficult situation near conflict zone, because 6 years ago the conflict started in Ukraine, and it is still going on. It's disabled people, children, orphans, prisoners, ex-prisoners, people living with HIV, AIDS, elderly people, and poor families. Here you can see a woman that receives help from one of MCC partners in Nikopol. It's a charitable foundation, New Life. And often, you know, the story is connected from childhood, and being abandoned and neglected, it's like creates some difficulties in people's story. And this is the case. And because of humanitarian assistance from MCC, this family of 6, so this mother had 5 children, and because of this help, they can have access for basic things, and it make a difference in their life and impact of love. This is a young couple. They both graduates from orphanages, so they do not have parents, and you know, economic situation very hard in Ukraine, and after being graduated from orphanages, these people have a lot of challenges in their life, and one of our partners support them. Here also a story of one man that was in very difficult situation, and our partner in Kharkiv region, they found him abandoned in his house and took him to the mercy, to the home of hope and mercy. And you can see the same person, Alexander, from right, I think, yeah, right. It's after he was in this home, and this helps. This helps to maintain this work because of these resources. And also, I would like, you know, there is a lot of different stories. I would like to share a little bit my personal story, my personal journey. It's how I was connected with MCC. It's a story that started almost 6 years ago, and my family, at that point, we had like 2 kids with us, and we were living in Mariupol. It's a city in Ukraine that very close to the border with Russia, and we never thought that war came to Ukraine, and it was the case. The Mariupol, the situation was very like difficult in Mariupol, in the center of city, was occupied by armed groups, and because of safety reasons, my family, we took a decision to left Mariupol and being displaced. And you know, it's very difficult experience because no job, like no opportunities to rent, and our family, we found ourselves in a very like difficult situation, in need. Yeah, and it was, you know, for me, for my experience, it was very difficult to ask for support, you know, because because of my pride, I think. And then I asked for support, and it was like a touchful blessings, because this was very important support for our family. And you know, then I started to volunteer with the organization, and named New Life in Nikopol region, and little by little I started to observe the very great work that they are doing, because before I never I didn't see like value in the social work, but after that, my perspective changed because of I see this experience inside of the organization, how this support, how this help it affected to people's life. And I would like to thank everyone because, you know, it's like every one of you, I think, a part of the story, and MCC serves like a bridge that connects those who can support others and those who are in need. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Andrei, for your work, for your stories about partners, but really especially for your personal story. You've shared it before, and whenever I hear it, I'm moved again at how violence touched your family, and now you have found your way through to working with MCC and touching the families and friends of others who have been also hurt by violence. A few questions have come in, of course, and we're grateful for those. I'm going to pose one for all of the panelists to think about, and then we'll let you, as many of you as would like to comment, can do that. But one of the questions is, how is COVID-19 affecting our work in Ukraine, Jordan, and other places? So think about that for a moment. And then someone's also asked, in addition to this material resource work, does MCC continue to do peace work and development work? And absolutely, the answer is yes to that. Andrei had snippets of the fact that we do peace building work as well. And there would be many other places around the world where we continue to work in education, water, sanitation, hygiene, of course, agriculture, trauma healing, and peace clubs, which are growing rapidly in many parts of the world. So yes, there's a broad range of work that includes, but is not limited to, material resources. And I have to share this one just before we go to panelists. Somebody out there, while they're listening to the three of you, is also cutting out squares to be made into comforters. So not just participating in the webinar, but helping to make a comforter to maybe eventually ship to one of the places you are. Thank you to whoever you are for making a comforter today. So which of you would like to pick up the question of how COVID-19 is affecting your work? It may be the case for Winnipeg, but I think I'm going to go to either Jordan or Ukraine here. Alex from Jordan, please.
Okay, yeah, the situation, we were really hit hard, I think, and the government did the preemptive move. We're in total lockdown. So you're right, basically now actually at 7 when the webinar started, the sirens were on, everybody should be home. So it's that bad. We're having a hard time reaching the partners for their own sake and us. But the good thing, speaking especially about the material resources, this is one of the essential things that the government kept going. So that service is still going, and our broker agent is getting through the containers. In fact, we got 2 arrived at the port of Aqaba today, and they're going to be released hopefully next week to our partner. But of course, we're going to take the most precautions in handling and downloading those containers. Yeah, but distancing and social distancing is key, and it's in effect. And we don't have a clue how it's going to be, but basically we're going to communicate at least at a distance with our partners now.
Thank you, Alex. Very helpful. Andrei, from you.
Yes, we had strict quarantine, I think, for almost 2 months. So the direct contacts were very limited. But one of our partners, they continued to work during this time of COVID. It's an L partner because they work with very vulnerable category of people, and MCC helps them with emergency projects to have protection gear, because of they work with homeless people and those who are in very acute need. There were no chance to stop their work for them, and they took a decision by their own to continue this work. They support people with food with like basic food, with warm food, you know, and some of their work also was connected delivery of material resources to people's home, you know. So they tried to have this distancing, yeah, like. And another project that that came to my mind, it's like refocusing like tools for online tools. It's a work with people with disabilities. So partners started to readapt their work in this way, to send lessons and to like different instructions to the to parents. And another partner, it's connected to peace building, AVP partner. Usually they have like direct meetings with people, direct trainings with people's presence, with people's involvement, and they started to use opportunities through Zoom calls also. So most of our educational partners, they continue online, but some had to delay start, you know, because of, for example, we have like a work with Roma community, with children, and there is no access to technologies in this community. So this part was paused, and it will be resumed after quarantine will be like released. Sorry for my English.
You're doing so well, Andre. Andre and Alex, thank you. And your stories of innovation and partners continuing to find ways to respond even under extreme circumstances, they're inspiring, and they align well with what we're hearing from other regions as well, where partners are still finding ways to respond. I have another question. Or sorry, Sophia, did you want to say anything else about COVID and its impact in where you're working, Winnipeg?
I can say a few things. I know that, and maybe I'll zoom out here, because I know that the context, you know, looks different in all material resources centers, because you know, and every province and region has different you know, guidelines for how to you know, to be safe in public and work settings. So for a few months now, we have had you know, no volunteers in the warehouse, and what we can have them doing, they are doing from home. So I do have volunteers that are cutting squares for other volunteers to sew into comforters from home as they're able. I know other regions have, you know, they have found ways to do contactless pickups of projects to do at home, taking things for their volunteers to just, you know, keep working at. And so it's just an evolving situation. So we will see what we need to do to, you know, to kind of keep volunteers working, whether that's, you know, families and homes that are purchasing supplies, or whether that's our regular volunteers. It will be, you know, with the priority of keeping everyone safe, and you know, and still trying to meet these needs for shipping. So it's just, things are changing all the time, so we're trying to be vigilant and respond to that.
Very helpful. Sophia, I'm going to come back to you again with this next question, but don't worry, I'll give you a moment to think about it. The question that someone's asked is, why ship comforters from North America, from the US and Canada, if MCC could buy them in a region closer to the need? And I have a hunch each of you might have something to say about that. While you think about it, someone else wondered, how are we keeping churches updated on what's going on? And there are lots of ways. In the US, the local regions, and here in Canada, the provinces have the primary touch with local congregations. And so there are, biannually, there are donor impact reports. There's something, our magazine called A Commonplace, a hard copy magazine that comes out, and an e-newsletter called In Touch. So there are lots of messages going both to individuals as well as to congregations to keep people updated on MCC's work. Sophia, can I come back to you for the why shipped from Canada to the US?
Sure. So I think the main thing that guides our decisions to send material resources internationally and everything that sort of comes with that is the idea of availability in access and quality, and so MCC is always trying to think about how to do our work most responsibly, not just, you know, for those folks there, but they exist in communities that are in contexts that, you know, and economies are part of that context. And so when it does make sense and when there is availability to purchase locally, that is something that MCC has done. And so that's not something that that's totally ruled out. There are other circumstances where, you know, if a civil war has, you know, really devastated population or an economy, it just might be difficult to access anything close by that is at reasonable price, that's good quality. And so those are the times where it makes sense to send things internationally. And I think the interesting thing about sending our comforters is something you mentioned earlier, Rick, where the personal element to it, there's almost no comforter that's alike, and folks can see that this was made by someone. They can understand that it was made by a human being that at the very least understood that there was a need and wanted to respond. And that's one of those things that it's hard to tangibly, you know, quantify how important and how meaningful that piece of a comforter is too.
Yeah, well said, Sophia. Thank you. Andrei, I'm going to go to you next. Why is it important when you're in Ukraine to have things that are coming from US and Canada?
You know, our people, when we have like a learner tour from Can and Meat team, yeah, the team very often asked people regarding the quality of this meat, and people responded how they cook it, how they use it with say in their food, and they said that it's impossible to buy such quality product in Ukraine, even in market, you know, in supermarket, it's impossible. There is no options to have like this quality without any bones, without, and people also are very touched by care of others. You know, if it's something that is purchased by in the commercial sector, I think, you know, like from supermarket, from mass market, it's not as important as Sophia said. It's like personal attachment to those who contribute. Yeah.
That's often part of the story. That's often very much at the heart of the story, isn't it? Alex, what would you add?
Thank you. Actually, yeah, I'm going to second Sophie and Andrei about the quality. This is something special you don't get any time. And for a personal reason, call me old-fashioned. I like two other elements. First of all, Mennonites are doing this, and people are praying, gathering together. It's getting people on one side, and they're doing it, and they have a lot to donate. This is one side. The other side is, I need and I adore the message that someone is thinking of you, and he's doing it while they're praying for your own good, and they're sending it. Something, you know, you can touch. It's not just like funds coming through and I go buy it from any store and just, that's it. It was like cash. This is something you can touch that was touched by someone before you. This link, human touch, is priceless, to be honest.
Well said, Alex. And I would just add here that many of you, especially here in Canada, will know the story of the Canadian Food Grains Bank, which began as a sending of food grown by grain farmers, many on the prairies, and has evolved now to almost always purchasing, that is turning the grain into funds and collecting other funds, and then purchasing the appropriate foodstuffs, usually very close to where they eventually need to be used. So I think it's important that we see the wide range of how MCC has tried to be adaptable and use the support of local markets when we can, but also to cultivate this deep, rich tradition of material resources that's being talked about here and that some people are actually doing while we're doing this webinar. Another adaptability question has come in here. Are there requests for new types of kits? And I just learned this, but apparently we have changed our hygiene kit a little bit to include bleach and disinfectant. I see the nods here from my people, my colleagues who already do all this. The bleach and disinfectant to help prevent the spread of disease. So there's a case of listening to partners at a special time like this, responding, and then try to provide material resources that are a direct response to these times. Would any of you want to comment further on that?
I can, maybe
Please.
I'm enthusiastic today. Yeah, we've been doing this with our partner. Really, they've been doing a great job, Caritas Jordan. There's always like a questionnaire, suggestions, feedback on all the kits they're receiving, how much they use from it, how much essential, and what if they had the chance to change it. They've been feeding us since 5 years all these feedbacks, and I've been, of course, challenging it to our partners and like HQ. So hopefully, yeah, we're always up to date, and we hope we try our best with what we have and what we can afford.
Nice. Thank you, Alex. Hey, another question. This one I think is directed to Henri and Alex. So I'll go to you, Henri, first. It's about the legal restrictions and the barriers and the shipping challenges that you may run into to bring material resources into the country where you're working, in your case, Ukraine. Could you comment on that process, please, Henri?
Yeah, you know, like Ukraine have a lot laws and also like unwritten laws, you know, like unwritten, like yeah, and so it's very like a challenging process to go through bureaucratic machine of state. And our partners, they worked with the Ministry of Social Policy to receive like permission for entry the cargo. And then it's like some complicated process. And recently MCC were added to the special list of facilities, can't meet facilities that are allowed for entry into Ukraine, because when we were not included in this list, the import of canned meat were not possible. And because of this hard work with the support of US office, Tom Werner and all others in his team, it was possible, and this was a result. Yeah. We always have like something on our plate, you know. We think that, oh, that's it, we will move through this challenge and it's done, but then another came, another, you know.
Well, thank you for always being there, ready for the next challenge, Henri. But that is a hopeful story of being on the list and able to bring canned meat into Ukraine. Alex, what would you have?
Yeah, Rick, sure, there's lots of bureaucracy. You know, the government tries to always tax us, paying processing fees, but I have to give gratitude to MCC's support. Not enough, it's the donation of the material resources. They're paying the expenses of shipping and freight even inside Jordan. So this is at least also another generous support. And the good thing that's been happening with us, we have a treaty or a signed agreement with the Jordanian government since '68, and we always uphold it whenever we fall into trouble with the tax department or the Ministry of Social Development. We always win the moral grounds, I would say, by saying, look what we have, that it's through, this is a donation. Yeah, but they try, but it's something we can always get away with.
Thank you, Alex. Hey, to our participants, we're nearing the top of the hour. We are going to take time for a few more questions and would welcome you to send in a few more before we need to part here. To our panelists, you have, to varying degrees, touched on this. All of you have been quite personal in the way you related stories. But I'd be interested if there are any other particular stories you would like to share that help us understand how in your work, working with material resources and partners and distribution and seeing the impact, how has this affected you? What ways has this touched you as someone who works with Mennonite Central Committee? Oh, I didn't pick anybody. Sophia, let's go to you first.
Sure. Well, one thing that I was going to share, but there was some time constraints, is that when I first started working for MCC, this is about 5 years ago, I called my grandparents who were living in Ukraine, which is where I was also born, and I was just touching base with them and you know, telling them about we're not ethnically Mennonite and we're from Western Ukraine, so I was just telling them what MCC is, what I did in my job, what kinds of things we send. My grandma got up in the middle of the conversation and walked out of the room and came back holding up a Tide comforter. There was no precedent for these kinds of paths having converged that I knew of, and so she told me that the Mennonites had taught her and the women in their church how to make Tide comforters with fabric and sewing kits that were provided for them. And so she was, as I was learning about comforters and making comforters in my job, apparently she was also making comforters for work in to serve vulnerable people in Ukraine, and somehow comforters had found us both. And it's you know, on one hand, it's no surprise the long arm of Mennonites everywhere in the world. It's you know, found its way into my life from many different you know, avenues, but it was a really beautiful reminder, because my grandma was, when she was 9, she and her mom were sent under Soviet Ukraine, under Stalin. Their family lost everything, and they were sent to labor camps in northern Russia in the Ural Mountains. And so she knew what it was like to be without, completely without, and to benefit and, you know, sometimes rely on the goodness of strangers. And her life's work became helping where she could and alleviating other people's suffering. And so it was just really interesting to see kind of her trajectory, what she her actions and her choices, and how, you know, in some ways our paths were really similar. And it feels like those personal stories are that perspective is constantly a grounding force for me, to just kind of yeah, to remember yeah, that just little for we all live in such disparity in this world, and so just what a little thing can do, and what a comforter can do, and to share that legacy.
Wow, thank you, Sophia. Great connection to Ukraine and to the outreach of blankets over dozens of years. Thank you. Andrei or Alex, no pressure, but opportunity if you want to say more here about personal impact.
A half of a year ago, we had opportunity as MCC team to visit our partner that involved in peace building. It's near front line, the city of Avdiivka in Donetsk region. And we heard from the partner that humanitarian aid assistance, it's a like very powerful tool to build connections between people, and an opportunity for further to have like peace building, you know, peace building. So it's like deeply connected. It's like holistic approach. It's not impossible to have like one part only, and holistic approach. It's very valuable that people. Yeah, it's not just words, you know, not just regarding some parts, but about all. Yeah, thank you.
So material resources as part of holistic ministry. Beautiful, thank you. Alex, we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but you've been very enthusiastic all day here, so we would expect you to have a word here still.
Sure, you bet. We're going to talk about Jordan. We are, as Christians, we're a minority of the population, yet we have so many denominations, churches, the Latin, the Orthodox, the Baptist, the Anglican, and the Mennonite have been key in supporting those churches, especially with the material resources around the year. And what I love that connection is we're empowering those different churches. When you see a high percentage of the beneficiaries on their list aren't the Christians, it's also the Muslim communities that's around them and in those towns and faraway cities. So this has been a great support to them because they're showing the support in return, and they're gaining the respect of the majority of the Muslims that surround their communities. So this has been key, especially with this material resources. It's key also to support those churches, and they support their community in return. So yeah, that's my personal story that I admire and will continue to do actually.
Beautiful. Alex, thank you. Thank you, all three of you. And, you know, if this was a radio broadcast, we'd be thanking producers and technical people. And there are a lot of those that have done a great amount of work to make this come off. So yes, applause to them. Especially though, Andre, Sophia, and Alex, for giving us glimpses into your lives, your family's lives, partners' lives, the work and the impact of material resources in the way that you get to be part of this. Thank you so much to participants, the person out there cutting squares to make a comforter, special thanks to you. I want to end with a story as we wrap up here. Alex, you reminded me of it as you talked about relationships with the Muslim community. I remember being in Palestine, Israel, 2011, and being with a partner from Gaza, a woman from a Muslim partner who led that partnership. And we were talking about the label on our canned meat, in the name of Christ. And there had been lots of debate over the years of, you know, when that lands in a Muslim community, is that in some way difficult, or does that present, you know, raise barriers between Christianity and Islam? And so I was a little nervous where this conversation might go. And she said, not at all. At times in Gaza, we feel so isolated. To get a gift that is clearly from the Christian community in the West is such an affirmation of being remembered, of not being forgotten by the people that we sometimes think are supposed to be our enemies. So that was a very powerful testimony for me of material aid generally, of food, meat, and the fact that we do our work in the name of Christ, and that does send a remarkable message across a lot of barriers. So thank you again to all of you who have contributed in any way. We are back with a podcast again on the 17th of June. There'll be a question and answer, of course, with our global health coordinator, Paul Shetler-Fast, and we'll talk about the effects of COVID-19, especially outside the US and Canada, and how the pandemic is hitting those communities, vulnerable communities in a particular way, and how MCC is able to respond to those vulnerabilities. We're grateful that you're with us. Thank you for all you do to support MCC, and we hope to see you again in the middle of June. Bye for now.